these to welcome our special friends, these panelists. And so because of time, I'm going to dive right in by asking them, a first question, and then little by little, you'll get to know them. And then hopefully toward the end, we'll have more time. But we're glad that you've joined us, all of you. Folks may be jumping in or out throughout, and that's no problem. But we also have the chat. And so if you're not one of our panelists, we invite you to use that in whatever way, although questions might come toward the end of our time together. All right, so I'm going to work through the order or in who's on from left to right on my screen. And it's going to begin with our pastor from San Diego. So please tell us, sir, your name, where your parents are and were from in the Philippines, and where you were born and grew up.
Yeah, well, welcome everybody. It's great to be with you all. My name is Matthew Amargo. I'm the son of Filipino American of Dasmariñas, Cavite. And my mom is Leilani Amargo, formerly Tolentino, of Binakayan, Kawit, Cavite. So I'm from the seat of Philippine independence in the province of Cavite. But I didn't grow up there until I was 13 years old or so. My dad's a retired naval officer, so grew up all over the world. I was born in Okinawa, but spent most of my early life in San Diego. And after my dad retired, we moved back to the Philippines, and I spent high school and college there, which was just a wonderful time of my life. Moved back here to San Diego, and I think that covers it. Yeah.
That's great. Yes, that covers, because we're going to come right back to you pretty soon anyway. The next up, if you can tell us those same things, is a fellow pastor in the Chicago area. So would you mind to tell us about yourself?
I think that's me, right? All right. So yeah, my dad, I'm EJ Ravago. My dad was born and raised in Abucay, Bataan. And my mom from San Felipe, Zambales, which is the Ilocano part of Luzon. But both provinces are from the northernmost big island of the Philippines. And my dad was also in the Navy, just like Matt's dad. And I was actually born on the Great Lakes Naval Base up here in North Chicago. So grew up here all my life, northern Chicago burbs, specifically Gurnee. So instead of moving around, my parents put the housing allowance into a home so that we could kind of grow roots here and not just move around like a normal Navy brat. So that's it.
That's really good. And I can testify he is indeed a brat. All right. It's all love. And finally, joining us from the latest time zone, the latest time currently, is our friend from Boston. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hey, everybody. Really happy to be here. My name is Kat Hampson, or I guess my long name is Catherine Rose Soriano Runes Hampson.
There you go.
I know you got to have the multiple middle names. So my mom is from Mangaldan, Pangasinan, and my dad is from Palawan. I was born in the Philippines in Manila, but I grew up, but we moved, my family moved to the United Arab Emirates, and I grew up in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and then moved to the United States for undergrad, and where I've stayed ever since. My parents are still in the UAE. My dad is going to retire soon, so he's looking at going back to the Philippines to retire. But yeah, that's where they are. They've been there since 1989.
Wow. And we were just discovering that there might be a connection. There probably is some kind of connection between Pastor Kat and Pastor Matt's families, since they both have some kind of roots in UAE. Is that correct? Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going to begin with you for the second question then, Pastor Kat. What is your current role and title right now? How would you describe your current ministry context for friends who may be listening and not familiar with Highrock?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a lead pastor of a small church in the greater Boston area. We're on the East Coast. It's a multi-ethnic church, but majority second gen, Pan-Asian American. and white. There are a lot of grad students and young professionals in our congregation, so it can feel pretty transient with people, moving in and out. So I entered this role in April 2021 in the middle of the pandemic pastoring, so much fun. And yeah, previously I was a worship pastor at another church.
That's great. Yeah. Wow. And so it's not yet common for there to be Filipino American lead pastors. And I'm just so grateful that we can say in the Covenant Church that you are one of ours, the first, but hopefully not the last, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're really excited about that as well. Pastor EJ, can we go to you and hear a little bit about your current work, your role and title, how you would describe your present context for ministry?
Title is Holiness Reverend of, I'm just kidding. Lead pastor, church planter of New Abbey Covenant Church here in Waukegan. Waukegan is 20 some miles north of Chicago, and we planted with a multi-ethnic vision. And so we planted in 2016. We're probably 60-40 Filipino, so 60% Filipino, 40% other. The other is white, Hispanic, non-Filipino, Asian. And we're a small church, so don't think we're a multi-site or mega church, but we're real small, making it work up here. Waukegan is a working class suburb, and so yeah, we have that the grit, the grime, all of it, and most of us are second, third gen sons and daughters of immigrants. So
nice. And Pastor Matt, can you tell folks about SDCF?
Yeah, so I pastor San Diego Christian Fellowship's North Congregation. We are a multi-congregational church here in San Diego with congregations in South San Diego, where I pastor in kind of the middle Kearny Mesa area. And we also have a Filipino congregation, a Tagalog language congregation. So 3 congregations, but one church. Each congregation is small as well, none over about 100 people. And I've been pastoring for 9 years here. And it was launched first as Filipino American Christian Fellowship. But in 2007, there was a merger with an older Anglo congregation, and we relaunched as San Diego Christian Fellowship, signaling a more multicultural openness there. And but we're still, in my particular congregation, we're still about 85% ethnically Filipino, mostly second gen though, and others are Hispanic, Anglo, African American as well.
That's great. And I just want to acknowledge that one of your fellow pastors, Pastor Steve, is with us in
He's watching me.
Conversation. So
he's watching me. Steve
I was
Houston.
telling you so you would know not to say anything regretful, Matt. Just
Thanks.
kidding. Welcome, Pastor Steve. We're glad to have you. So today, for lunch, actually, Dr. Daniel Lee and we were able to be joined by 3 Filipino American pastors near West Covina. Actually, they're from far out. From I think Artesia is his church. He lives in Palmdale. I'm learning about the geography here. And another serves in Oxnard. But these 3 Filipino American pastors joined us with the one who organized their coming. He's in Pomona. And it was a great gathering where we were just sharing with them about the Filipino American Ministry Initiative, which we call FAMI. And we created this initiative to really build community and to establish resources for Filipino American Christians and pastors. And that's been, for many years, kind of an ignored population when we think about the development of resources for ministry. And so we're trying to help supply what's been lacking. And we got to this great conversation over Filipino food at a nice place called Salo Salo, so you could check that out. But they were going on about how their ethnic congregations and their own identities all kind of relate. Like they cannot lead except out of who they are. And I think that that's so important for us to acknowledge, that there's like a God-givenness that we need to learn and honor in the way that we pastor. For those who are joining and don't know, I'm also a full-time pastor in Chicago of Garden City Covenant Church. And that's, about a 65% Filipino American congregation as well. So I want to ask our panelists, and they can go in any order now, just whenever you're ready, the three of you. How does your own Filipino American identity, as unique as yours is, since we have some very diverse stories here, but how does your own Filipino American identity influence the way that you lead and the way you care for your congregation? Do any of you want to go first for that? And I would just love to hear your insights. Matt, why don't we start with you?
Why don't we start with me? That is a big question. And as I think about becoming comfortable in my own skin, not only as a Filipino American, but also as a pastor. It's only till recently I think I felt comfortable with calling myself pastor. I was a lay leader in the church, was working in the professional field, and was called back in 2013. And so I think that's a big question for me in general. But I think specifically related to my Filipino American identity, I think it's embracing that, and also the tools that come along with that. And what I mean by that are there's certain sensitivities that are just innate. Having grown up in the Philippines and as well as America, and being able to kind of code switch when it comes to talking with different congregants, understanding what they're saying and what they are not saying through words and not through words. Being able to be sensitive to different environments, whether I'm stepping into a home or stepping in front of the congregation. And so I just really am blessed, and I thank the Lord for those tools that were acquired by fire as a American going to the Philippines and growing up there, and just being immersed in that and being able to bring that back here. So I think that's in my unique upbringing. Not that you guys are not unique. Everyone's unique. You guys are great. But that was kind of the journey that brought me into this context of ministry. And I'm thankful for it. All these things did really work together for good, for the work of the ministry.
That's great. Yeah. Kat, would you add to that, please?
So for context, English was my first language growing up. My parents intentionally did not teach me Tagalog first, and that's kind of part of my own wrestling and part of my own journey of like, am I a true Filipino just because I have preschool knowledge of Tagalog? And so when asked the question, how does the Filipino identity influence how I lead? There's always part of me that has to ask, like, is this actually a Filipino identity? Is this, or is this just something that I see in my parents? And it's just something that I have to wrestle with. And I think actions speak louder than words. So what I can tell you and what I can share are actions that I see in the communities that I grew up in. And it's not until later that I'm like, oh, there's a word for that. Or like, so someone told me kapwa, and I'm like, what is kapwa? This was, a little in my college years, people were telling me like, oh, kapwa. And I'm like, what is that? They're like, oh, sense of, belonging and togetherness and this shared identity. And I'm like, I've seen that. It's when they, people come over after church, they just gather around the table, they come in unannounced, and that's, like, your home is their home, and you all share something, like more than food, you share this kinship. I know that Bayanihan huts exist, and I've seen them, but there's in learning about them, I'm like, that word for helping literally move your neighbor's house and just that sense of community. I'm like, oh, I've also seen that. I think there's so much more I could say, just like joy and celebration and appreciation of beauty, the striving of excellence. And Matt, I really liked how you talked about understanding what people are saying even before they're actually saying it. I think that's something that I also hold, and that's part of how I operate in ministry. But anyway, all of these things, just saying that they're things that I've observed and things that I've held in my bones, but I would struggle to give a word to it until someone gives me the word, and I go, oh yeah, it's that. And that's part of my Filipino identity. So anyway, I'm on this journey.
Yeah, and we're definitely all on a journey as well, right? And that it's not like a linear path either. I think the last several years have taught us that there are things that happen around us or even in our lives that kind of push to the surface some of these questions or even memories that we've put away for a bit. But EJ, how would you think about that for yourself? How does your ethnic identity influence the way you pastor?
I think a big framework or piece of being Filipino is the idea of family. I mean, we grew up believing everyone's family, right? So we have our biological family, our aunts, our uncles, cousins, all that. But then we're taught to look at your mom's friend as tita, your dad's friend as tito. And so like I remember trying to sort out, growing up, like who's really my biological aunt and who's just a friend of a friend. But really, like the Filipino worldview is like everyone's family. I mean, and in between, our parents, peers, and us is kuya, ate, or manong, manang, right? Everyone just related. And I really think that this broader view of family aligns well with scripture. When scripture talks about family, and so pastorally, that's how I treat my people. Who are under my care. It's like you are in my family. And that's attached to many things. Like I'm going to be loyal to you. I'm going to bat for you. I'm going to defend you. All this stuff that family takes on. And so, yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest kind of framework I've brought into my own pastoral identity and congregational identity is like, man, we're a family and let's figure it out together. We're on a journey together. Let's walk alongside each other. So,
yeah, that's really good. I think we would all kind of recognize that functioning, even if we can't quite name it, right? But it raises for me some questions, which I'm going to kind of dwell on this for a bit because, as a pastor also, that sense of kapwa is definitely operating in my ministry. And then when you combine that with like the bond of fellowship or the Holy Spirit, which makes you into siblings in Christ, right? Or to family, then sometimes that can be a challenge. Like if we have kapwa or we are kapwa and we share identity, then it can be very difficult for me, for example, to have boundaries. Because if you're upset about something in church and I'm the pastor of the church, now suddenly for me, I'm thinking I'm failing. I'm not doing it right. And it may have nothing to do with me that you're upset, but this is the complicated part about kapwa or about some of these kind of Filipino cultural values, right? And so I would also ask the shadow question to us, like, how has it been challenging to be a pastor while also either being Filipino American or Filipino and also dealing with fellow Filipinos at times? Either of those, I'd love to hear what you think, but how has it been maybe difficult to lead as a Filipino? But Kat, you're nodding, so I'm going to go to you first. How would you think about that?
All boundaries, all good things. Yeah, no, that strikes a chord. The first thing that came to mind was a sense of like conflict avoidance of like, yes, family, we want to keep the peace. And so some things, it's very easy for passive aggressiveness to be part of the formula of how things are communicated or not communicated. And I think it's something that I think in my own journey, I have to keep in check of like, this is a shadow side. Like I want everyone to be happy, but I don't want them just to be happy on the surface. I want this actually to be reconciled, and to enter into reconciliation means that you got to stir up some of the really, the really jagged, sharp, edgy stuff and say, hey, I'm surfacing this so that we can heal. I think with that, being able to let people own their feelings and without holding them has been a lesson for me. So I think it's part of the shadow side of being family is you want to hold everybody's feelings. You want to be there for them. You want to be able to you want their pain to go away, but sometimes you can't hold that for them. And it means establishing boundaries, which can feel really painful in the moment.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Matt or EJ, how would you add to that?
Yeah, Kat, I'm with you. When we think about dealing with issues of brokenness and just the Filipino um, just orientation to just sweep things under the rug and pretend they don't exist. I think that's a big thing. That's definitely a big thing when we think about pastoral ministry. In general, I also think about how there are things in Philippine culture that are wonderful, beautiful gifts, but if taken to the extreme, can be unhealthy, right? And I think about just enmeshment in certain relationships as we think through even when we think about marriage counseling and the role of the extended family and how much that gets in there, things like that. I'm also thinking about how beautiful it is that there's a strong sense of community. But sometimes, if we're not aware of that, we could run into challenges. I think about the time when we launched out our Filipino congregation, and we were dividing life groups to go to one congregation and the other. And I wasn't as aware that for the members of a particular life group, what I was asking them to do was like death, to say goodbye, to multiply, use the term multiply, right? But for them, it's like it was such an issue. And I was like, how did I not see this? And the Lord was teaching me patience through that, to be aware of that, to navigate that with some more sensitivity. So I'm just thinking about that in my particular context. Yeah.
Those are very real, for sure. Like, unless a kernel of wheat dies, we can't multiply. It's like really what they're
Oh
gonna
man.
die to. I'm just joking, by the way. Please don't take the verse and use it the way I did. EJ, how would you add to it?
Oh my goodness. I really nothing, because I am a work in progress. I'm still trying to figure out how to negotiate boundaries. You guys know me. I'm Myers-Briggs ENFP. I'm an Enneagram 7. I want to be part of your life. I want you to like me. And so, the value of family, I mean, just being a brother, being a kuya, being an uncle, it's really high for me. And so, I'll be honest, I just came back from a retreat that's part, for pastoral renewal, for burnt out pastors, essentially. And so I see how boundaries are helpful and necessary. But, to be honest, as a human, as a Filipino human, I don't know how to do that, to be honest. And, sometimes when I hear pastors describe boundaries, it's almost like offensive. Like, how are you not available for that person? And so I just have to work through some of those Filipino things just so that I could be healthy myself. So long story short, I am negotiating how to have boundaries. I don't know how that works out. My church is small enough to be available more than some other pastors. But moving forward, yes, I got to figure that out. But that's just my raw answer. I don't know yet.
Yeah, raw is good. I think that I don't mind for that to be a challenging question, because it's such an important one, right? And this is part of the work we want to do here at FAMI, but also it's normal that we would go into ministry for 5-10 years before we get to this place where we have to renegotiate some of these things, right? And realize, okay, it's been 5-10 years of ministry, but why do I feel this way? And now that I, perhaps have a family, maybe not, but what's it going to take to be sustainable in this work if God is calling me to do it long term? And boundaries become very important in that, I think, or at least priorities, right? If we can think about it that way, rather than looking as a fence that's built between us and others. We can think about it in terms of an order of loves or of priorities. So I think about
can I just answer
Absolutely.
one more thing to that question? I think I was thinking one other shadow side, I think, to a Filipino American identity. I think we do have to talk about colonial mentality. And in pastoral leadership, I mean, funny that all of us, at least the three panelists here, we all pastor small churches, and it is hard not to compare ourselves to large white churches who have money, who have resources, who got the staff, who are incredibly, apparently, like talented and magical and wonderful, and you're sitting here going, What have I, like, what have I got to offer? And so that trap of comparison, I think, it goes hand in hand with, I think, a colonial mentality where we're like looking at, we're looking at white folks and white churches and going, how can we be closer to what they are? And so I think that's something that I know that I struggle with, and I need to be aware of, because it could seep into how I do ministry.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Kat. And feel free to jump in anytime, the three of you, because I think that's exactly what we want, is we want to hear from you. But let's stick with that, Kat, for a moment, right? Because in literature, colonial mentality is seen, especially by, of course, psychologists, but even sociologists in Filipino American studies, as the main impediment to health, right? And we can totally recognize it, as you said, that it's not the work of God, right? It's often impeding what God is seeking to do in being, God working the new life in and through us. So I want to talk about that. I think I'm glad you brought it up, and I was kind of waiting for someone to do so. But how do you see colonial mentality manifesting in either your own pastoral wrestles, especially the last couple of years, or in your journey into ministry? I'll start so that you can have time to think about it, since this wasn't something you knew that we would talk about. But there's a real shame that can be tied to being in Protestant ministry as a Filipino, right? So it's like you want to be respectable, and you also are grateful for the work of ministry. Maybe you feel a call to it, but if that call is going to include some suffering, there can be some shame associated with that. And Protestant communities, right, are very much a minority within the Filipino and Filipino American communities. So like now you're doing ministry, you've studied for this, and you're all in, and then people are looking at you, and there's just a real strong sense of shame. And then now it's like you're already in Protestant ministry as a Filipino, and then now you're comparing yourself not only to like white communities, but also to Filipino Catholics. And that can be really challenging for your sense of self, but also even for your wallet, your pocketbook, and your future aspirations. But I think that's just one example. But yeah, Matt, EJ, let's talk about colonial mentality. Anything you want to say or ask about it, but especially your experiences.
Yeah, I think I'll go. And Kat, I really love what you said about kind of the size of church, and we could talk about that later, about how I think that we have the gift of having small churches and having actual community, and that's a blessing that we have in our context. But I think about so I grew up in Filipino American churches, wherever we were, small Filipino American churches, and I think for some of us who are Filipino or in immigrant churches, the shame that you have when you're like, I can't invite my friends to church, my American friends to church, because they just won't get it. It'd be weird. It's embarrassing. And so I think, that's part of just growing up as a Filipino American in general, but carrying that forward into ministry too, this constant need for thinking of validation. Like, what does it mean to be a valid ministry of value? And those are just some lies that just had to grow out of and see, like, there is value here in this particular ministry that we have. But I carry that along with me, even as I catch myself looking at other Filipino American churches too. I'm like, oh man, they did that. That's so Filipino. And what does that mean when I say that? That is so Filipino. Mm-hmm. And now I think the Lord has helped me grow to the point of like, you know what? That's something to be celebrated. That is Filipino. To the extent that we launched a Tagalog-speaking congregation where they could be unapologetically Filipino in all they do, in the songs they sing, in the crazy parties that they have, in the lechon that they eat. They have so many presentations, so many dance numbers, but that's beautiful because the Lord is working through that, and the gospel is expressed through that and in their fellowship. So I think it's moving out of that immature shame of my identity and our identity in ministry context as well, and to celebrate, from shame to celebration.
Matt, you got to share the name of that congregation though.
Well, it is the Filipino Congregation, also known as TFC. So
All
it's
right.
STCF TFC. For those of you who don't know, the Filipino channel is a major thing in cable here in America. So TFC.
I had to, because I have been there and joined them for lunch, and it was wonderful. I all the gifts, like you said, like I wouldn't want them to not be themselves, right? Just like I
Absolutely.
wouldn't, as a second generation, like Filipino American, I wouldn't want to not be myself. And I just love that instead of shaming them, right? Which is a pressure that we have now that we're the ones who are the pastors. We're in our 30s or 40s with the education. It could become easy to like, okay, let's hide all the titos and titas, right? Hide all of those things, right?
Kick
But
them off worship team. We don't want.
yeah. But what we do, right? This is all related to CM, colonial mentality. Like we don't want people with accents in front. And if we think about what's actually happening, like, and we want people in front who will like make us look good. But what are the things that we are associating with looking bad, right? And then that's you know what? Having their own space where they can be free is also wonderful in a way that hopefully is not a marginalizing space, but is a space of like empowerment and celebration and honor. Okay, EJ, we gave you a lot of time. You got to give it to us.
This is a tough one. You know, I'm continually just disentangling colonial mentality from just my experience. You know, one big one for me, it's like it's the whole colonial thing is a two-edged sword. So, for example, you know, part of the Filipino church shame is, man, we're not theologically trained, right? And so it's like, man, can I invite my friends here? You know, do we have something to say? So part of my development was through the academy. Like, I don't want to be that first gen pastor who does not have a degree. I want to be somebody, right? So got my MA from Trinity, got my MDiv from North Park. And so now I could be invited to the table, you know? And so it's like a two-edged sword because theological education is important, but why am I doing it? And so like, I want to bless the Filipino church with, you know, intellectual theology and, you know, just the views on God. But at the same time, am I doing it because these white folks won't listen to me? And I want them to have access to us too. And so it's like, it's just this constant wrestle with my identity. It's like, why isn't that person talking to me? Is it because he doesn't know I have a degree or what? And so it's just this mad wrestling that I don't know what to do with, you know? And I think it's just one of those things we just have to just take on as second gen people. Like we're the gap generation who says, you know what? Yeah, take one for the team. You know, I want to be the bridge for the first gen Filipino church to the academy or to the white space and just take the hits both ways. And yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that the majority church won't give the time to listen to a first gen pastor because he doesn't have a degree. And, you know, in many ways, I guess a second gen fills that gap, but it's unfortunate that it's because of some of those things, those entanglements. And I don't, maybe some of you guys could speak into that.
Yeah. Oh, we will, I think. And we're raising just so many things. I see the chat lighting up, by the way. So people are really resonating, or the things that you all are saying are resonating. So we have a lot of people who will watch this also later on, but even the folks who are with us right now, many are training for ministry. Many are seminarians or training for the work of counseling ministry or to be future therapists. And so I want to talk about the call, right? Your call into ministry. And I think related to that, we didn't ask this early, so I saved it for now. How long have you been in pastoral ministry? That's the first question that I'm asking right now. And the second is, you know, how have Filipino culture or values or practices kind of shaped your journey or helped you get there? Or even to stay there? Matt, you're nodding, so I'm going to go to you first this time.
Yeah. So I came to my church back when I moved back from the Philippines in 2002. So it's been 20 years. And I joined at the time Filipino American Christian Fellowship because my cousin went there. That's what we do. And have been there for 20 years, but served in different ministries, lay leadership, worship leading, all the things, all the stuff, right? Small church, you do everything. And then went full-time vocational in 2013. And I think what I want to communicate by that, it's just like, I cannot imagine being anywhere else but my church family. I know that, as people in pastoral ministry, in vocation ministry, they have different paths, different seasons, graduate from seminary and, get, what's the equivalent to monster.com where you have placement and you look for a pastoral position? I don't know. But it's just like, I can't conceive of that because of kind of where the Lord has brought me up in this church. This is my family. And will I die here? I don't know. Maybe I will. But I think that there's something to be said. And maybe that is a Filipino cultural thing about, this is my family. I serve them. I love them. They've seen me grow as a person. They know my flaws. They knew me before I was a pastor. And there's something about that, the rootedness of being there. And so I know that won't be everybody's journey, in seminary or whatever, going into full-time ministry. But if there is that opportunity to remain rooted, I think there's something that can be beautiful about that. And so again, that's what I have to say about that.
That's really good. Yeah. And your church is blessed to have you for sure, because that's a very special and rare thing to have people there so long and to grow.
Yeah. And I wish it wasn't so rare. I wish that there was this more of this equipping and building up, where you don't have to get your degree and go somewhere else, that you could stick with it, But, I know that things are different. We have different calls with different journeys.
Yeah, that's good. Kat or EJ, do you want to share about how long you've been in pastoral ministry and maybe how some Filipino culture or values, practices help you to get there or stay there?
On my screen, you're pointing to Matt, back to Matt.
Love it.
Okay. So I think I haven't been, I've only been a year and a bit in this lead pastoral role. Previously, I mentioned I was a worship pastor. Kind of stumbled into that because, again, like we were in a small church at that time. The lead pastor was doing everything. He was burning out and was like, "Oh, you have a good singing voice." And I'm like, "Well, thank you. I'm Filipino." And I took that on. And I'm trying to remember if there was something specific that really kind of turned the dial that helped me say yes to where God is calling me right now. I think looking back, oh, by the way, previously I was also in college ministry, in college campus ministry. I think for a very long time, I think my kind of call to ministry, even before college ministry, was God asking me, do you want to see people come to life? And that's, I think that I put that in my bio. But that's been that's been an anchor for me. It's something that I've returned to time and time again. I've spent some time in the kind of secular workplace. I've done the stint as an intern, a pastoral intern, and as a worship leader, and college ministry. But I keep coming back to that question of how is God calling people to life? How am I part of that journey? And Matt, when you were talking about rootedness, there was part of me that really wished I knew what that felt like. I think as a child, growing up at the Middle East, my parents were the weird ones that saw everyone come in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And there's a challenge to that. There's a lot of pain, for sure. But I think we learned what it looks like to equip people and send them out and have this be a normal part of life. To embrace someone as part of your family, and then when it's time to let them go, you send them out with all the blessings that you can give them and say, like, go with God, like you are, just sending them out. And I think in my call to ministry, where I am right now in this particular church, in this particular time, yes, small as it is, transient as it is, we're not going to have like people for generations stay here. But I think there's part of that knowing how to minister in transience that I bring to this church context that says, like, you know what, maybe I may not be called to ministry in all the churches everywhere, but I know I'm called to this place and I'm called to these people. And, you know, when the Lord says, hey, let's go on to the next opportunity, I'm still going to bring that question of how are people coming to life with me? And so I think that's where that's definitely influenced my understanding and where I, you know, see myself at this point in time.
That's really powerful, Kat. I just want to acknowledge how both of you, Matt and Kat, you have very different kind of vocational formation, and yet they're both really powerful and important. So I just think, wow, that's special. No pressure on EJ as he adds something different to also kind of show us something.
I told you that Kat should just speak on behalf of all of us. I told you, Kat. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't know where to count, you know, when I started ministry, because if you grew up in the Filipino church, you're in ministry, right? So from Sunday school teacher, youth leader, something, whatever. But
That's
vocationally, right. I've been a pastor for 12 years, 5 plus years as an associate under my dad, and then 6+ years, close to 7 as, you know, church plant. Man, the cultural value piece, you know, one, again, the framework for me is family, and right under that is sacrifice, right? You sacrifice a lot for your family. And, you know, my parents are probably just like any other immigrant family. Our parents are the hardest workers out there, right? My dad served in the Navy for 20 years. After retirement, he served 20 years in the civilian workforce. My mom worked really hard. She was 25 years in a medical device company. I will never work as hard as my parents. I mean, they are just top notch, just like any other immigrant parents. They did that all because, not because they loved money, but because they loved family. They wanted to position, you know, me and my sister to have access to all the good things out there. And so, you know, what I took from that is, you know, you got to sacrifice for people under your care. And again, that's how I view, you know, my church, right? You got to be careful though, you know, as we just acknowledged earlier, that we have to establish boundaries or whatever. But I think at part of pastoral ministry is to, again, negotiate what the sacrifice looked like, right? One thing that I knew, I'm not sure if it's still true, but, you know, every Filipino pastor that I knew would always make the joke, well, if you go into ministry, you won't make any money. And so, I mean, Filipino pastors sacrifice financial stability. And, you know, I went into ministry knowing that, and it's proven true. But thankfully, I married a nurse who stabilizes the family.
Amen.
So me too.
Yeah,
me too.
See, there we go. If you want to be a pastor, your spouse has to be the moneymaker. That's the Filipino pastoral track. That's it.
Oh, there's a lot there, and there's a
lot there.
There's a lot there. Yeah. Wow, such different journeys. Okay, EJ, yours was also as good as Kat and Matt's, so that's fine. We'll take it. By the way, for those who are with us online, we are able to go past, you know, the next 11 minutes. Like, we could stay on for 15 minutes after the hour, just as a heads up, since our panelists are gracious with their time. So we would hope to have some time for questions as we get closer to the end. And, you know, we only have a couple questions left that I want to explore with our panelists, but I think that we are really clear so far about a lot of the challenges, the wounds, even the pain that can come from growing up in a Filipino American Christian home and in a ministry family, and then to kind of take on that work, right? But, you know, there are also so many gifts, and some of them have already been named. I think that that's so important and even healing for us to acknowledge. So I've kind of asked about these, and I think what I'm asking for us as pastors right now to do is to kind of step back from our own individual church and even our own individual work, and to think about the Filipino and Filipino American communities, right? So I'm asking the three of you, from your experience, or your observation of others, of other Filipino Americans, Christian leaders within the Filipino American community, especially, what are some spiritual or cultural gifts that you see that our people can bring to the church in the United States? And
I'm
I think
going before
EJ
Kat.
touched on, yeah, go ahead. You want to raise it? I was going to say you touched on one already, which is the ability to sacrifice, where like so many people have this kind of clerical professionalism where like, they think ministry is going to be a 9 to 5 and they don't want to sacrifice. And I think that's not cruciform anymore. So I think you kind of already touched on one of these things that you see.
Right.
But yeah, so what are some others, as you think about the Filipino American community, the Christian leaders within that, some other gifts spiritually or culturally that we can bring?
Well, I'm going to answer it this way. So I think the American church in general is trying to figure out, how do we get our parishioners to do life together, right? And so, I think that's just a struggle I see across the board. My parishioners come and hear the sermon, and the Anglo rapture, right, as Danny Martinez says it, right? So like, and you have a bunch of books dealing with it. You have classes dealing with it. You have the sexy conferences that deal, how do you do communal life in the church, right? And what all these things are saying is, well, okay, meet in homes, do small groups, eat together. And you think about it, that's just the Filipino thing to do. That's what we do. And so, I mean, we don't have the branding, we don't have the books, we don't have the seminary classes that teach that. This is just what we do. We don't call it small groups. It's just come over, right? So I just wonder, instead of going to the latest, coolest, edgiest conference, man, just go and learn and observe the Filipino church. All 4 of our churches represented here have a similar thing going on. And that's the way they do church in the Philippines. They don't call it small group. They don't call it dinner church. They don't call it, cool small group. It's just church. And so again, just observe, learn, humble yourself to learn from Filipino people. So
That's really, yeah, that's good. But I do want to go to cool small group.
don't go to a cool small group. They don't have food there.
True.
They don't have rice there. So
Never mind. Not cool.
you see.
You gotta have like the plate full of lumpia.
Mm.
Mhm.
That's a gift.
I think, yeah, it is. It's a cultural gift. There we go. Cultural, spiritual gift. Gosh, so many good things have been said already. I think something that comes to mind, and I think this is something that well, anyway, I'll just say it. It's solidarity. The shadow side of it is assimilation. So I think when we can, if we can turn away, if talking to Filipino Americans, Christians and leaders in general, I think if we can turn away from the pull to assimilation and turn towards solidarity and say, what is the shared struggle? What is the struggle that I can humbly enter into for, to lift you up, to walk with you, and not in kind of the not in the kind of enmeshed way. You realize I'm like struggling to articulate this because this is also new to me, but being able to say, what is the shared struggle that I have with another individual or with this community? Not enmeshment, not taking over, not colonizing, but true solidarity. I think that is a gift that actually does come from a Filipino story of the diaspora, of being in all these different places, of being a part of so many different communities that may not be our home community or our home country or our homeland, learning how to survive, learning how to be resilient, but also learning how to be ourselves fully for another person or for a group of people. I think that's a gift that does need to be developed, but it's a gift.
Really good. Really good. Yeah. A lot of nuance. I think we're all kind of like wanting to be real cautious about how we do things, but I think you're really touching on something important. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add briefly to that, what Kat said, I think it's embracing the Filipinos' innate ability to be kind of bridge builders for some reason, everybody likes us. I think, right? Everybody I've met, like I'm non-threatening, I'm short. People like to talk to me, right? I mean, I don't know, anybody else experience that? But it's just like, with and harnessing that for the good of the gospel, of gospel culture, to being able to bring people together. That's a gift, all throughout the world. You see Filipinos just acting as folks who can bring people together, or can at least provide some social lubricant and such. So, and it's not just the lumpia, it's the love that's there.
Yeah. Oh,
So many good questions in the chat.
Can
by
I
the
can
way.
I add something to Matt's kind of
Yeah.
comment here? So yeah, I think the bridge building piece is huge. As we just kind of explore multi-ethnicity, I think cultures like ours, with our complicated racial, ethnic formation, with us being Asian, and if you want to use the word Hispanic, I think we could be bridge builders in ways that other groups cannot. And so yeah, I think our colonization again was hurtful, right? And it was violent, but at the same time, God could turn that around for us, to leverage multi-ethnicity in our contexts.
Yeah, there's definitely that. And that's something that I hear from pastors and from like up and coming theologians who, whether they're undergrads or seminary students. And it's touching on the question that's raised in the chat. So I'm going to go to the question from Paula, who's one of our Fuller students, and ask this. And I think I'll go to Kat first and then Matt, because I think your two contexts have already kind of named this engagement with multiculturalism. But Paula's asking, how can you encourage a Filipino American congregation who's been resistant to multiculturalism? And I think in the question's asking about, perhaps if God is calling the church to be more hospitable or welcoming to non-Filipinos, how can you encourage that congregation if they're mostly Filipinos? So Matt, why don't we go with you first, since that's something that your church has kind of wrestled with in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a wrestle, but I think it starts with understanding what is God's call for your particular church. You might be in a context wherein, like, if you really are ministering to immigrant families, you really are ministering to kind of first gen new arrivals that are still arriving, right? And so that's a thing. But if the call is sensed that it's like, no, the Lord is moving us into a more multicultural direction, then we really have to again harness the Filipino superpower, the gift of the spirit of hospitality, right? And just to the core, just sell out to that, because that is a beautiful thing. However, I will say that, no matter what you do, when people walk into that church and they look around and they see a bunch of, Filipinos, it's going to take some pioneers to go in and be like, you know what, these can be my people. And they're not Filipino, right? And then from that, the Lord will flow and the Lord will bring people. But I think it's just a matter of having that posture of welcome and intentionality, and maybe try not to speak Tagalog around them, when they're, if they can't speak Tagalog. So things like that. But, I think that's a wrestle we still have, as we think about that. And you can't just marry them and that be the way, well, maybe you can, I don't know. Maybe that's another way to do it.
Yeah, that's actually my counsel as a joke to denominational leaders when I talk to them is, if you want to diversify your church, bring in the Filipinos, because we'll marry everybody. But I'm kidding. Kat, how would you encourage a Filipino congregation who's resisting multiculturalism?
This is I actually want to hear EJ's answer more, because I do not pastor a Filipino congregation. I'd want to hear what you have to say, EJ.
EJ, what do you think?
Ooh, well, Jay, you know where I'm at with this. It's a very difficult question for me to answer, because this is going to sound contrary to everything I've said so far. But I feel like, well, first, why? Let's explore why they're resistant to multiculturalism, right? Like, what is it? Is it fear? Is it the loss of identity? But here's my hesitation, because I really believe that many first gen churches should stay first gen churches, because there's a beauty there that must be preserved, right? And so I don't know how to answer the question. And for example, I served under my dad's church, is a first gen Filipino immigrant church in the city, all Filipino. And in many ways, I feel like it was healthier for me to leave because, whatever second gen issues at the church or in my life weren't translatable, and I'd probably do more damage than pastoring there. So I really believe that, again, I don't know how to answer the question, because I think there has to be a lot of preservation, and some churches aren't called to multiculturalism.
Right.
I think I appreciate that. It's a hard thing to say, and I'm sure nuances abound. We are called to solidarity. We are called to mutuality in the body of Christ, and body of Christ meaning more than just, our congregations, but the larger body of Christ. And so even if as a church, we may not every church is, called to diversity. And I think, EJ, your point about, what's the motive behind the push for multiculturalism? I think if it's a diversity push, then that's different. But if it's like, hey, we want to offer a new ministry because there are, new generations coming up, or gosh, there's an opportunity for ministry in ways that we've never, thought about before. I think there has to be, solid motives and reasons for the push for multiculturalism. It can't just be, it's got to be more, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. And I would totally agree with that. I think one of the things that we can kind of empathize with, if we've been there, is that when we grow up in a predominantly Filipino American church where it's led by perhaps first generation leaders, I think that it can be tempting to desire for the church to become different than what it is, because we've experienced some things there that we're assuming are being caused by the lack of diversity in the church. So we think that the problem is the church's Filipino-ness. I've transitioned to church from, 95% Filipino, my first pastorate, to less than 80%. And that would technically make it, by some markers, a multicultural church. But I think that was a move that we tried to discern very slowly over the course of many years, because we recognized that God was already bringing many non-Filipinos into our church. And we just tried to understand what the Holy Spirit was doing. But I think that's a little bit different from being in pain, growing up in a Filipino congregation, thinking that this church will be better if it's more diverse. And I think that's just something that we have to wrestle with. And I'm not saying that any of our questioners are saying or coming from that experience, but that's just also something that happens very easily. And the reverse is true. Now in my current context, we started as a church with about 75 or 80% Filipino Americans. And now we're at about 60% because second generation Filipino Americans have left their predominantly white churches, and even other Asian Americans have left their predominantly white churches during the years of 2020 and 2021. And so they kind of came to our church looking for a place to heal, where they could actually embrace their Filipino-ness. And so it's a lot more complicated than thinking that, the answer will come from simply being multicultural. But depending on where you sit, sometimes that's presented as like the solution, right? Yeah. And so obviously Dr. Lee's in the chat helping folks to understand the categories here. But yeah, we want to think, like you said, Kat, that diversity hopefully is not just about optics, right? But it is about learning to help the body of Christ embrace their God-givenness in the way we disciple, right? And then the literature of multiracial and multi-ethnic churches is starting to see that in evangelical spaces where they've embraced this over the last 20 years, the churches have been led predominantly by white male pastors. And because of that, it hasn't really resulted in a real robust discipleship that has like responded to the neighborhood's needs around and to like, society's problems, but instead it has mostly discipled people into some kind of like white normativity or white evangelical way of thinking. And so there's a lot there, but I think the question is a good one because it forces us to wrestle with call, right? And to discern like, what is the Holy Spirit doing in this place? And then what do we really think of as healthy? And why, right? Because colonial mentality can also push us away from being predominantly Filipino and wanting to be like whatever is kind of in the day or in the moment kind of seen as the ideal church, whether that's multiracial, multi-ethnic, etc. We have a question. I'm gonna keep kind of Paul's and Paula's question together since I think that those are very closely related. But Kristen asked one. And Kristen's one of our formation group participants and students, and she says, I wonder, is there a future in bivocational FAHM pastorship? Because not everyone is called and getting married. Not everyone can marry a nurse either, or someone who will pay the bills. But I think more importantly, the question, besides the joke, is there a future in bivocational Filipino American pastoring? Some of us have experience with this, wearing multiple hats. But yeah, what do the three of you think? EJ, why don't we go with you, since I know that you also wear multiple hats?
Is there a future? Of course there is. I think that's the future for many churches, not just the Filipino church or Filipino American church. As we wrestle with, the idea of tithing the church. I mean, that tradition is kind of losing its foothold in the church, and so I think moving forward, churches are just thinking creatively, how do we stabilize financially, and that's one way to do it. For me, for example, I'm bivocational. I don't want to say what I do. It's nothing illegal. It's not as cool. But yeah, I mean, I have to do that to support the family. And my dad's bivocational, and I see this as being a normative dynamic for FAHM pastors.
Matt, you started outside of the church. So what is your feeling about this as you've been in both spaces, and so have you, Kat?
Yeah. I don't know if there's a future. I think maybe it's the present, for, again, like what as EJ was saying. It was a big shift in mentality for me to go from a lay leader, a lay elder and teaching elder, to being a full-time pastor. So that's another conversation of like that mind shift for me and how I saw myself. But yeah, I think EJ said it. Yeah, we're moving with the times. We're shifting. Yeah.
Kat, do you want to?
I still think it'd be best. I think it's best if you're able to be full-time vocational to devote yourself fully. But we do what we can with the call that we're given, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'll repeat that. There's nothing. I think Paul KP in the chat said most. The reasons why FAHM pastors may be vocational is due to congregation size and financial strength. I'm paraphrasing. Sorry, Paul. But I think that is very true, and it goes with what both of you have said. It's happening.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we have just like 5 minutes left, and I wanted to save this since y'all have been so generous with your input and the wisdom you're sharing here as panelists. But what challenge would you give as a Filipino American pastor to Christians broadly? So if you could speak to, say, like the whole Fuller audience or anyone who will catch this later, how would you exhort them? And then maybe specifically, how would you charge or challenge younger Filipino Americans who are preparing for vocational ministry and maybe even for the pastorate? I will go with Matt and then Kat and then EJ.
Oh man. What charge would I give? I would say the simplicity of loving Jesus, the simplicity of resting in his grace, and knowing that because of him, that we are enough, in a sense that he has equipped us, he's called us, he's empowered us to what he wants us to do. And that's what I rest in every day. I fight imposter syndrome for the last 9 years. I'm like, am I really a pastor? Am I really a pastor? But just resting in the grace of God, delighting in his word, and just learning more how to pray, like how to really pray, how to listen to his voice. It's very simple, not very articulate stuff, but I think that's the charge that I would give, just to love the Lord and to be loved by him. And that translates into any context, into any culture. But specifically as a Filipino American, yeah, I guess that's not specifically as a Filipino American, it's just as a child of God, right? So
That's good, Matt. Thanks.
I love what Matt said. I think my charge would be the church needs to hear you. The church needs to hear your story. The church needs to hear your voice. If there's ever a time where you second guess yourself and you're like, but that part's not important. No, it is. All of you is important. Beautifully, wonderfully created, made. You know what it means to live life together. Bring it out. Like, that is, we need that in the kingdom of God. We need that in the family of God. And to, any Filipino American woman there who is called into ministry, a Ruby Ibarra lyric is coming to mind, but just, like, island woman rise, you're called by God. Celebrate that. And I'm right there cheering with you, and so is the rest of us. So that's my charge.
I love that. You just quoted Ruby Ibarra. How fitting. EJ?
I'm Googling Ruby Ibarra to quote some lyrics just to top what Kat said. I'm just kidding. Oh man, this is okay. So broadly to the church, I would just quickly say, listen to everyone. I mean, every culture, every person is made in the image of God, and I would challenge people to listen to someone who has a different experience than you. Now, to the Filipino American person who is exploring vocational ministry as you study in the seminary and the academy, I would just encourage you again to, as we try to improve upon our first gen experience, and we should, I would also say, don't leave the first gen church behind. We always have this idea that the grass is greener on the other side. Know that the Filipino church is just filled with beauty that we cannot abandon. And just know that just that cramped storefront church that smells like lumpia, right? It's just shoulder to shoulder. There's a beauty there that you could translate into your own context, right? So that's part A. Part B is this. One thing that I struggled with as a Filipino second-gen American is I had no mentors. I had no mentors that were Filipino American, right? And we had to look to the Korean Americans, the Latino Americans for advice, for mentorship. So I'm putting it out there. If there's anyone who just wants to just process anything or needs a mentor out there, a second-gen Filipino American, I'm available. Again, if you could handle an Enneagram 7, an ENFP, someone who will love you, hey, I'm in. And I would just love to walk alongside you, because I did not have that. I've craved that all my entire life, and here we are. I mean, we are part of that first class of second gen pastors that are available to anyone wrestling with vocational ministry.
I love it. I'm going to add my own sense, because I'm able to know the three of you before this day. And I think finding people who will help us to gain a positive image of Filipino American Christian leadership, like the three of you are giving to all of us right now, is priceless. Not just for mentoring, but even to see what's possible. And, I hope that at FAMI, we can do that, and hopefully use the resources we have to create space. But I'm so grateful for this opportunity to converse with you three, because Matt, Kat, EJ, and many others who are not here, like people like you make it possible for others to actually come behind. And people have gone before who've made it possible for us. And I think just keeping that in mind, right? This is such a wonderful thing that like y'all pastors help us to love ourselves. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful for this time, for Fuller's FAMI celebration of Filipino American History Month. If you're in SoCal, we'd love to see you in historic Filipino town tomorrow as we take an art walk with Alicio Silva. I see that flag, EJ, hallelujah. And please do be in touch with us so that we can help to create resources together. And I just also want to give my thanks to Pastor Steve, to Susan, to Paul, KP, to Kristen, Ren, Dr. Daniel Lee, Josh Arnaldo, hey Josh, and Jillian Garcia, who's making all of these things possible behind the scenes. You're doing the work, Jillian, thank you. But yeah, let me pray for us and dismiss. Gracious and loving God, creator of us, of each one of us in your image and of our people, the one who redeems and knows our stories, who heals us and makes us agents of healing. Send us out with blessing and with the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. We'd love to be
Thank
in
you,
touch.
guys.
And go in peace. God bless you.